And that is the universal message at this point.
Right, it is. Yeah, and the video you saw earlier of the ambulance on the freeway, police escort, of course, full police escort, and there they are again. This is not live, of course. This was earlier. This is one of the two ambulances. You can see both the ambulances there. A large police presence. This is when they were arriving at Memorial Hermann Hospital. When there is an officer shot, you have a police presence that is incredible.
Yeah.
It is a brotherhood and sisterhood where everyone comes together, and they provide a massive escort so that there is no delay in getting these officers the care which they so desperately need at this point. And you can see how the motorcycle officers there as well that helped provided that escort, the ambulances that were involved. You'll usually have a line of officers that kind of stand outside, just in reverent and solemn salute and tribute, and not knowing the injuries of the person, because we don't know at this point. Look at it. Look at the line and the procession. Sense. That gives you, exactly. It gives you a real sense of the emergency of the situation, and also this right here. This was the scene earlier where there was this massive presence. We've seen a lot of groups like this gather, but yet we have not had yet to this hour any response as far as an official news conference from the Houston Police Department, from the city, from the county Sheriff's Department, or any of the agencies.
Well, and we often see when those news conferences do occur, the mayor will be there, the police chief, usually the sheriff is there in solidarity. We may see many other officials from other local law enforcement agencies, because they recognize that there but for the grace of God could go any one of them, that their job is extraordinarily dangerous, and it is a reminder for all of us who are protected by these agencies every single day just how dangerous their job can be. So we are expecting any moment now to have some kind of news conference from the mayor and HPD police chief, so we have some sense of what's going on. But again, just to kind of go through this again, it was around 7 o'clock this morning that 2 officers were shot serving a warrant, and both, as you saw, taken to Memorial Hermann. They work for the Major Offenders Division, and if this is a division we don't hear a great deal about, we can assure you their job is to go after some of the most dangerous criminals out there, and that is always, a possibility when they are in a situation like this, and that includes accused murderers. Obviously, assuming this suspect shot at them was the person who shot at them, clearly that was a very dangerous criminal who did not care what happened here. We've got some images that continue to come in that just gives you a sense of just how enormous this police presence has been, both at the location where this happened and also at the hospital.
The hospital right now, Charlie Edsity is standing by. That's the location of where it all took place, where it all began earlier this morning. Still awaiting any word from the mayor and as well the police chief. They are still inside the hospital. Is that correct, Charlie? And presumably speaking with family members and trying to get their chronology of events here.
Yeah, that's what we're told, is that both the chief and the mayor are inside the hospital right now, meeting with family members of both of these injured police officers, updating them on what's going on, what's happening before they officially come outside and speak with us. And so where we're set up right now is directly across the street from Memorial Hermann. And so I want to step out of the way right now so you can get a sense of what things look like outside in front of the hospital. So there's a heavy police presence. It's looked like this for about 2 hours now. We arrived out here on scene just after 8 o'clock this morning, shortly before both of the ambulances carrying these injured police officers arrived here at the hospital. And just really quickly, a side note here, out in the front, I do see a large presence of police officers moving out of the hospital. So I don't know if that means anything, but we are seeing some movement here. But it's been busy all morning long. We still have a very heavy police presence. Obviously, you're looking at it right now. And we saw lots of police officers on motorcycles ahead of these ambulances, and then also several units behind them with their lights on, trailing these ambulances as they pulled in here to Memorial Hermann. And so since then, things have calmed down a little bit. I think everybody out here is still waiting for an official update on what's going on, the health status of both of these police officers, and hoping for the best. And so what we've been told is going to be happening is that the flow of information is going to come from Chief Finner as well as Mayor Sylvester Turner. Again, both of them are here on scene inside the hospital, presumably speaking and meeting with the family members of both of these officers. Once they are finished meeting with the family members, that's when we're told they're going to come across the street and speak with us. We don't have an estimated time frame of when that's going to happen. We were told that information maybe about an hour ago, so we've been waiting here to see if anybody does come out. But as soon as they do, of course, we'll break into programming and bring those updates to you. But we were told that at the time, an hour ago, family members of these police officers were still arriving on scene. So it just depends on when everybody gets in place and family members are all updated and briefed. That will dictate when we will see an official update begin. But I know, Mel, that you mentioned this the last time we spoke, but I was just saying how I've never seen, a police presence this large. There were too many units to count out here, especially when those ambulances arrived here on scene. And, it was obviously under the worst circumstances. We never like to see any of our police officers injured or hurt while they're on duty, but also just, incredibly amazing to see the amount of support that they're getting from their fellow police officers. It does bring a little bit of light to this very heavy situation. Many of those police officers are still here right now. Some of them are sitting across the street, gathered together, have been waiting right along with us for some kind of an update. Obviously, there is a lot of concern there for the well-being of their coworkers, and it just goes to show how much of a family that this police force is, and that they're sitting out here waiting for some kind of word or update on their coworkers. And so the hope here is, of course, that we will have some positive news to share. We do not know anything about these police officers. They've been very tight-lipped about sharing any information about them. We just know at this point 2 HPD police officers that were up on the northeast side executing that arrest warrant when this shooting happened. So that's all the information that we have out here, but hopefully we will be able to share something with you soon. And as soon as we do, we definitely will bring that to you live here on the air. But yeah, that's kind of the sense and the feeling out here right now in front of Memorial Hermann. Pretty heavy feeling out here as well, I think, as everybody is just waiting and hoping for some good news here.
Charlie, I want to ask you kind of a logistical question, if I could. This is Monday morning in one of the busiest medical centers in the nation. A lot of people with appointments first thing. What has it been like in terms of people being able to get through that area, or do you see any portion of the streets blocked off?
Well, at this point, since the ambulances already arrived out here on scene, things have gotten a little bit less congested right here on this main street that runs in front of Memorial Hermann. But when I'll speak for myself, when I was trying to get here this morning, coming from Galena Park, I mean, there was your typical morning traffic, but then as soon as we started to get into the medical center area, that's when the traffic really started to pick up. And then they were already setting up police units to block off certain lanes so the ambulance could get through. So that proved to be a little challenging, and I think some of the drivers out there that were in this area who had no idea what was going on, that threw them off as well. And then you see just this massive amount of police officers on motorcycles as well as vehicles. I think that will catch anybody's attention. So I think for the most part, people were just trying to get out of the way as this ambulance made its way through the streets here in the medical center. But traffic seems to be flowing okay through here as of now. And, we have been seeing more and more people arrive out here on scene. Notably, Sheriff Gonzalez, Mayor Turner, Chief Finner has been inside the hospital for quite some time now. So again, we're just waiting out here for that official update to come from them.
Yeah, and Charlie,
we can see that tree of microphones right behind
Sure, it's all set to go. Yeah. But Charlie, could you zoom in once again, have your photographer zoom in once again to the officers inside? I was just taking note of them being gathered. Right. It almost appears as though they were being briefed for a time, but, you just wonder what's going through their heads. You can see one officer with his head down, kind of almost in an attitude of being very, reverent and somber and even prayerful. Yeah. They could be gathering for prayer. They could be gathering for just a brief update as well. Go ahead.
It does look like they're praying. It does look like they're praying. Yeah. It looks like it's a pretty large group of them. And so, yeah, when the first part of my report, I did spot there was several officers walking out to the front area in this breezeway, signifying, maybe something was happening, but it does look like they are gathered there, maybe praying praying, taking a moment to just, decompress a little bit. Surely this has been a very stressful morning for all of them. And so I don't know if this signifies that we can expect an update here in the next couple of minutes after they wrap up what they're doing. But at this point, that's probably the largest presence of police officers I've seen over there since, this whole morning.
And a few plainclothes people as well. You can see the jacket there, Houston Public Major Offenders Unit. So you can, as soon as they walked up, you could almost see them cross their arms and bow their heads in reverent prayer. So perhaps there's a pastor there as well, a man of the cloth, delivering a prayer, or they're just praying silently all together. It's just a moving moment, moving moment. It is.
And at this point, that's pretty much what all of us can do, and that is to offer up a prayer. It doesn't matter how religious you are or what denomination you may be a part of. At this point, everyone is asking for prayers, every agency out there, law enforcement agency, and they know very well how important it is to be able to come together and ask for prayer, quite simply. Yeah. Ted Oberg has joined us, and Charlie, we will come back to you just as soon as you see that news conference begin to set up. But we do want to go to Ted Oberg right now, who has been following this as well, and has some sense, I guess, Ted, I'm not sure what you're working on, but has some sense.
The one thing I wanted to start on is where we just left off, and that is that foyer there, Memorial Hermann, has become part of the liturgy of our public angst when this happens, because it's happened way too often. And there is prayer, right? That we've seen the chief and the mayor part of prayer in that foyer there in past incidents. Thankfully, by the way, none in 2021. But last year certainly had to see that way too often for Houston police officers. And that space there where officers are gathered in prayer because that is all they can do and all we can do at this point, it's just sad and at points infuriating to see that this tragedy continues to come and the harm continues to come towards police officers. But switching gears slightly as we await word from the hospital, because clearly what is most important on this day is to find out how those two officers are doing inside that hospital right now, with certainly getting the attention of the best doctors that Houston can provide them right now. This is the scene of that shooting in Northeast Houston where we've been looking at all day. But one of the questions that we would ask in the investigative office is just what was the scene, this video from much earlier today, what was the team that presented at the spot to serve this warrant? Because one of the things that you don't necessarily see inside this tape is a lot of undercover vehicles, right? We see two marked units here with all of these officers gathering. We assume the scene was either in or around this building here. But what we don't see at this point, and this was, again, hours ago, was a large presence of an undercover team that may have been serving this warrant. And so that would lead to some questions about what did they expect? And maybe they didn't expect it to go this way, right? We know that serving warrants is one of the most dangerous things officers do, but you would suspect that if it was an extremely violent person, that the undercover operation may have been bigger than just the few vehicles we saw there. So there are some real questions, not for today, not for right now, right? There are the more important questions in front of this, but one of the first things we'd want to know is what was the team that came to this apartment complex in the early morning hours today to serve this warrant? What were they expecting? Who were they looking for, obviously? And a question for down the road is could the team have been bigger to provide more cover? Certainly, as you look at just how massive this apartment complex is, there's plenty of places, one, for a suspect to go, and two, plenty of other people that could be in danger if a shooting were to happen. And so we'd be curious to know how big the team was and certainly what they saw and what they heard this morning as everything went badly. But the other reason we know this was a planned operation because this happens in Northeast Harris County, well outside of the jurisdiction of the city of Houston. So it was planned, right? These officers had to go up into Harris County to try and arrest this person. And so I think it will be a fair question when the time is right about what was the planning that went into this warrant.
Absolutely.
And Ted, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, how often does that happen, where you have HPD officers moving into an unincorporated area of Harris County? I mean, is that, or do they generally work together on that? Are there officers from both agencies?
I would assume that there is some notification when an officer from Houston goes into Harris County to serve a warrant. If it is as small as it appeared to be today, there may not have been a whole lot of coordination. We know the sheriff was there awfully quickly, so there was some communication about that. I think there's more coordination when it gets further away. I mean, we've all, look, running errands, we move between the city and the county pretty regularly. So
Sure.
it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge amount of coordination, Mel.
Yeah. Ted, speak to us for a moment about the Major Offenders Unit. We know that these officers are very, very well trained. They know what they're doing. These are not 1 and 2 year, officers who have been in the force that long, but those who are veterans and who can deal with these high-level criminals. Speak to us for a moment just about how well trained.
It is a highly trained unit. It is not what you would see necessarily in the homicide division, right? Where the homicide division is all detectives, all people who are trying to figure out a crime and arrest a suspect. Major offenders will deal both with sort of crimes typically less than homicide. They are experienced, or at least would be paired with someone who's very experienced, and they are looking, actively looking for suspects and investigating crimes that certainly rise to a level within the police department that cannot be handled by lower level detectives, and certainly not by patrol officers. And they do plan for these specific instances quite a bit.
Well, I'm looking at the map you have in front of you. I assume Google Maps and the like are helping us. Give us some sense of the size of this apartment complex, because certainly as we've flown above it, it just looks enormous. Yeah,
Mel, it's in Northeast Houston. Here's the Beltway, and just off the side of the screen here is the 59, 69. And as you zoom in on this apartment complex, you can see that it is sizable. As Bree Berry was out there, she was saying that and Tammy Rose this morning, that the attention was focused on unit 30, or apartment building 30. And so when you look at all of these buildings, each of these appear to have at least 2 sort of townhome units in them. And so it is not the biggest apartment complex, but it is by no means sort of a small townhome unit. I mean, they are tightly packed. And so as you look at the danger that would have faced neighbors this morning, you can see just how tightly packed these units are together. Carports with 3 or 4 parking spaces in front, which leads you to believe there's at least 2 families that live in each of these buildings, maybe more, and then building after building after building as they zoom out to give you a sense of just how big this is and how many people, at 7:30 in the morning would be walking around there. You don't see it now because it's obviously now all a crime scene, but you can imagine an apartment complex of that size at 7:30 in the morning would have an awful lot of people. Ted,
we've talked about these awful and tragic scenes so many times, and as you said when you began to start off, that we deal with this just way too often. It's so very tragic. But we also know that after it's all over with, then we begin to look back and say, okay, what could we have done differently to make sure this doesn't happen again? But yet it continues to happen. But some things are just unavoidable. You're always going to have conflict, and someone's always going to, unfortunately, just be combative and have a gun and want to defend themselves in any way possible.
I think that's true, right? Policing is and always has been and likely always will be a dangerous profession. I think the statistics and the trends would suggest that it is becoming more dangerous in the last couple of years. One of the things we've heard from law enforcement, both at the city level and all the way up through the ATF, is that the level of violence is increasing. And you see that a couple ways. The number of people who are shot at scenes is increasing, and the number of people who are shot multiple times is increasing. In other words, the number of rounds that are fired at scenes is becoming far greater. And so there is something that law enforcement enforcement officers have noticed in the coverage that we've done and in the conversations that we've had that suggests that the culture of gun violence is shifting to the point that there is less respect or less fear for having the gun. Right. We've seen that throughout the pandemic, that not only has homicides risen almost 30% in the city of Houston this year, but across this country, the number of people who've been injured in gun violence, not necessarily police officers solely, but everyone, has risen astronomically to the point that in many cities you've seen the federal government come in because it is approaching crisis levels.
Yeah, that is an absolutely terrifying thought, but you are so correct about that. Also, we should mention that the ATF is on the scene, Ted, and do they usually step in right away when there is a police shooting?
If there is a question that they can help answer, they will absolutely be there. My assumption is they flooded without necessarily being asked. One of the things the ATF brings to an investigation like this is very quickly what they can do as soon as it's photographed and mapped. They can pick up all the cartridges from that had been fired, and in instances like this, there are going to be a lot of cartridges that were fired, bullets in essence, that were fired from these guns, and they can immediately test those bullets to find out which may be from an officer's gun and which from a suspect, and then start to link. This is really the high-tech stuff that the ATF brings that few others have the capability of doing. But the ATF can start to link those cartridges that were fired from a suspect's gun to any other shootings in the area to find out who else may they have been in contact with. Was this suspect using this gun in other crimes? And so the ATF brings a lot of tools to the table, if you will, in the early moments of this investigation, especially if there is another suspect that may be out there that may have escaped with a gun. They left some evidence behind that the ATF can help test very quickly and get crucial information to officers.
You know, speaking of that possible other suspect, we don't know. There doesn't seem, in your view, as you've seen this, there doesn't seem to be an active search, at least in the immediate vicinity.
Well, because we would have seen that in Bree Berry's live shots. We would have seen that from Tammy Rose in Sky Eye. There would have been patrol cars racing around. There would have been roadblocks. There would have been things set up quickly. Clearly, manpower at this scene is not a problem. They have as much manpower as they need. And if there were an active search for another suspect, they would be certainly closing things off to try and track that person down.
Well, Ted, I want to come back to you in just a moment, but we want to indicate, first of all, there's been a 5-minute warning, so we are assuming that press conference will start in just a few moments. And also, the mayor has put out a tweet that we do want to pull up if we can here. Basically, you see him there meeting with some of the police officers and saying that he is asking once again for prayers to again pray for the families and the officers themselves. So we will be hearing directly from him in just a moment, but it gives you a sense of what the scene is like over at that hospital. And Ted, a moment ago, you were talking about the fact that there seems to be so much more gun violence out there. There also seems to be a lot more, and I'm searching for the right word, but a lot more cavalier attitude, I would say, against police officers. People don't seem to be as quick to say, oh my goodness, it's an officer, I better not fire. And obviously that makes often dangerous situations even more dangerous. But if you would, talk a little bit about that.
I think it's true. Unfortunately, we've always seen that. And as we watch the mayor and the chief make their way across the street here towards this news conference, we'll keep that in mind and wrap up shortly. But yes, the number of police officers who've died is up dramatically from last year, much of that having to do with COVID, but certainly violence. They can't escape the attitude. I think police officers would tell you that they feel on the streets it mirrors what you've said, Mel. Although I do think it is worth noting that in the wake of what happened with George Floyd, there has been a reassessment, both from police and from the public, about the roles they all play in our lives, and maybe some respect that has been found on both sides of that equation, and hopefully the recent trend of increasing violence may start to wane. But statistically speaking, that hasn't shown up yet. It's a good question, Mel.
Good comments, Ted. Wonderful. As we see the mayor right there, he is dead center, and he is approaching, and along with the chief, Troy Finner, they're both approaching the microphones. We'll go ahead and listen in to see what they have to say.
And the Sheriff Ed Gonzalez as well.
Yeah, Ed Gonzalez in the background. There you see him on the far left. We'll see how quickly they get into this, and they should be able to start rather quickly. Good background of officers as well around them.
Let me make a few opening comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chief Troy Fenner. This incident took place this morning at about 7:28 a.m. We had officers that were part of a major offender unit that were on a narcotics arrest warrant this morning. Shots were fired, and two of our police officers from HPD were hit multiple times, and I'll leave that up to Chief Fenner. William Bill Jeffries, a police officer with the city of Houston, come December would have been 31 years. Unfortunately, he did not survive this morning. And then Officer Sergeant Michael Vance, he was also shot, is in surgery, but his condition appears to be fairly stable. I want to lift up the family, both families, but I certainly want to lift up the family of Senior Police Officer William Bill Jeffrey. And talking with his wife this morning, Suzanne, who also happens to be a retired police officer. She retired December of last year. And one thing that she made very clear to me this morning is that Mayor, the city of Houston, lost the very best, and so I wanted to echo that this morning because she was very emphatic about that the city of Houston lost the very, very best. So let's lift up his wife, Suzanne. Let's lift up that one child, lift up the entire family of Senior Police Officer William Bill Jeffrey. And then Michael Vance, Sergeant Vance, his wife is also present, and we're lifting them up as well. They had two kids, and so want to lift both of them up. This has been a tragic day today. It is another reminder that police work is inherently dangerous. And you never know, police officers never know what they're going to face when they leave their homes during the course of their duty. It is inherently dangerous. So I want to lift both of these families. I'm going to ask the city of Houston to pray for both families, pray for the Jeffrey family, and then pray for the full recovery for Sergeant Vance. I do want to give special acknowledgement to the Houston firefighters who responded very, very quickly and provided tremendous care to both. So I want to thank the Houston firefighters for their quick and efficient response. And then I want to thank the hospital staff of this particular hospital. Time and time again, they step up and they just provide tremendous service. Having said that, let me now pause and turn it over to Chief Fenner.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. Just want to first ask for prayers for our city, for our department, and most importantly, these families. Mayor said it, and I'm gonna say Bill, and that's what I want to start with, and we'll back up to the scene because what's more important is Bill and his family, and Sergeant and his family. 31 years of service, just a few days short of that. Most of us know him personally. I've known him my entire career. And just as his wife said, what a great man, what a great officer. Wife just retired, building their dream home with one kid. But you know what? Right now I want to celebrate the service of him and all of our officers around the nation and in this great city. I just want to thank Herman Memorial Hospital, the services that they provide to us. The mayor talked about HFD, Harris County, our constables, and everybody that's out here. Our union is represented. Just want to thank everybody. So let me move to this morning. The location is out in the county, 5350 Ariel Park. So this morning at about 7:28 a.m., officers responded to an assist the officer. We had officers assigned from the Major Offenders Division running a warrant. They knocked on the door. Female comes to the door, have a conversation with her, asks where's the suspect. The suspects immediately, one suspect immediately came out and fired upon our officers. Unfortunately, striking Bill several times. And as we know, he succumbed to his injuries. Sergeant Michael Vance, thank God we got him here early and quickly, and they working on him. He's in stable condition, so we ask for prayers for them. But what I want to touch on is some of the things that our officers go through. You got a suspect with a female girlfriend with small kids in that apartment complex, and he still fired upon our officers. Officers returned fire, at some point striking the suspect. The suspect is deceased at the scene. We will not be releasing the suspect's name right now. I could tell you he's a 31-year-old African-American male. I want to respect his family and make sure we get proper notification to him. But let's not forget, please pray for our two families. Now, as far as the investigation to go, it's in Harris County. They're going to conduct a criminal investigation as involved in all the officer-involved shootings. Our internal affairs will also be conducting an investigation, and the district attorney's office is out there as well. With that said, I'm going to ask if there are any questions. A little bit louder, I'm sorry.
You said you've known Officer Wells his entire career. How would you describe him?
He's a great man and a great family man. Everybody is special. Every police officer, every first responder is special. But like his wife said, he's one of our very best. And I'm telling you, I'm going to celebrate that. As we leave here after this press conference, we're going to start setting up for the escort to the medical examiner's office. And everywhere we move him this week, we're going to present and make sure we give him honor. And I want the whole city to step up and just pray for the family and pray for our department, because this is the thing. First responders, we can't shut it down. It's not assembly line. We got to keep it moving. And that's what we intend to do. We're going to uphold the family, number one, and we're going to uphold our city and do whatever we can in support, in cooperation with our citizens, to crush violent crime. Next question.
Chief, can you talk a little bit about the warrant? What was this suspect wanted for?
It was some type of narcotics warrant, and we'll get more deeper into the investigation. I mean, it's still active out there in the scene, but he was wanted on some narcotic charges.
High level.
You want
high level.
You can step up. You got, yeah.
They were there to execute a high-level felony warrant. So major offenders typically will run the most serious warrants there are. So these are the most serious offenders in our community. So all I know is they were executing a very serious high-level felony warrant.
Sheriff, can you tell us how many were there? Was it just them two? Were there other officers?
There were other officers in the unit. I don't know all the details. The Harris County Sheriff's Office is on the scene conducting that follow-up investigation. You know, our heart breaks for our brothers and sisters with the Houston Police Department, with the mayor, the chief, and the entire city. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we handle a thorough investigation for all involved. The chief already laid out what the process is in terms of it's a very comprehensive investigation. And briefly, en Spanish, esta mañana oficiales con el Departamento de Houston, la unidad de que investiga casos de sujetos serios.
Okay, you're listening right now to Chief Gonzalez calling it a very serious high-level search warrant, arrest warrant that was being executed this morning. And in fact, the Sheriff's County is going to be investigating this because it is an unincorporated area, so they continue their investigation. We also heard from Chief Finner saying, I want to make this a celebration of Bill's life. And I only call him Bill because that's what what the Chief Finner called him. He said, "We like to call him Bill." He was just such a friend, such a brother, such a companion to so many. For 31 years, he served Houston Police Department, and his wife as well, serving the department for many years, retiring only recently.
Yeah, she retired just last December, and as he says, they were building their dream home. But the worst possible news, what we never want to hear in a situation like this. And let's go back now to the chief.
I see representatives from the Afro-American Police Officers Union League here. Were they both members of APOL?
I'm not sure. I know they're probably members of one of our unions. Yeah. Go ahead.
How many times was the sergeant shot? The sergeant used in the hospital?
I'm not sure. Multiple times, ma'am. Okay. Go ahead. From who?
Ken.
Yes. Yes. Come on up. Yeah. It's our union rep. Come on. Yeah. Vice President of the union. Thank you.
Good morning. If we could get a comment from you from the union representing the officers.
Good morning. I'm Ken Neely. I'm the Vice President of the Houston Police Officers Union. As the mayor said, and also the Chief of Police, Chief Finner, said, it's a very sad day for the city of Houston. All our citizens, all our officers work tirelessly every day, 24 hours a day, to provide the best protection for the city. Our officers this morning that were injured and ultimately lost their lives were definitely heroes. The Houston Police Officers Union will be here to support the family, as well as the officers of those respective divisions where they work. We'll be here to support them, as well as some of our additional resources. We have our peer support unit, as well as our chaplain service that will be here. But the Houston Police Officers Union, just in cooperation with our mayor and our great chief, will be here to serve all our officers that were injured. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. Any more questions? Good. Go ahead. Yes, he's in stable condition right now, so we expect he's going to be all right, but we still need prayers, and later on today we'll push out more information as to his injuries. No, not yet.
He is expected to pull through, Chief?
Yes. Go ahead.
How long did he serve with the Houston Police Department?
20 years. Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank y'all.
Hey, that's Vance, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Vance.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Thank y'all. All right.
Well, we are learning a great deal more than we knew just a short time ago, both from the mayor and the police chief there, and to some extent from the sheriff as well. What we have learned, as we say, the worst possible news is that one of these officers died. 2 officers with major offenders showed up on the scene to serve an arrest warrant for narcotics. We don't know exactly what all that entailed. Yes, and if you're joining us right now, we just wanted to update you at this point. But those 2 officers showed up. The officer that passed away would have been a 31-year veteran in just a matter of weeks. Sergeant Michael Vance, the second officer, has been on the force for 20 years, in surgery now, but they said he is in stable condition and expected to survive.
Yeah, they expect him to do okay. But William Bill Jeffries, as he is known, what an incredible officer, 31 years. Charlie Etzedy standing by. She heard it all as well. And Charlie, what was most notable, of course, is just the demeanor of the police chief, along with all of those behind him, and as well the mayor, delivering the very sad and tragic news that this officer, Bill Jeffries, who was shot several times as he made that arrest warrant.
Yeah, just not the update that we were hoping for. Just some very sad news having to be shared right now. This is exactly why they were being so very careful about the flow of information, wanting to make sure that the families were notified before anything was said publicly. But of course, as you just said, we have learned that one of the 2 police officers that were injured in this shooting that happened earlier this morning tragically has passed away. And so I'm just going to quickly recap what we learned here from both Mayor Turner as well as Chief Finner. They just spoke here at this press conference directly across the street from Memorial Hermann, where both of those police officers were transported just after 8 o'clock this morning. Our Sky Eye did capture the moments when they did pull into the hospital here. And so once again, we have learned that Officer William Bill Jeffries, a 31-year-old veteran of the Houston Police Department, 31 years with the department, sadly has passed away because of the injuries he succumbed to from the shooting. And we've also learned the other name of the other officer involved, Sergeant Michael Vance, who currently is in surgery, but we are told is in stable condition and hopefully is expected to be okay. Chief Fitter asked for a lot of prayers for the sergeant, and that everybody is hoping that he is able to fully recover from his injuries. But, again, just not the update that we were hoping for, and obviously some very devastating news to hear for the many officers that are out here and have been out here for the last couple of hours waiting for any kind of an update. And earlier, when we checked in with you maybe about 20 or so minutes ago, we saw that large group of police officers that were gathered out in front of the hospital. Surely they were getting the pretty devastating news at that moment as they were all huddled together to pray. And so at this point, again, the chief asking for prayers for this officer's family. Again, his name, William Bill Jeffries, 31 years with the department, who we have learned sadly passed away from his injuries that he got from this from executing this arrest warrant that happened earlier this morning up on the northeast side. So guys, that's the latest we have out here in front of Memorial Hermann, but just incredibly tragic news. This is not the information that we were hoping to share. But again, prayers up for that sergeant who is currently in the hospital right now, had to undergo surgery and is in stable condition. So a little bit of good news there, and we hope that he does fully recover.
Well, Charlie, we should remind our viewers right now that we are in our 11 o'clock newscast, but doing a special report on this shooting involving a police officer, 2 police officers this morning, including one officer, as you mentioned, who passed away. I was struck very much by what the police chief had to say, Charlie, as well as the mayor. This was someone who was well known by everybody in the department over that 31-year period. And as even the chief said, someone we all looked up to, his wife, a retired police officer, and she said the city has lost the very best.
Yeah, just incredibly devastating to hear, words from the family and what the family is going through right now, that this is somebody who, dedicated his whole life to serving our communities, putting himself in, the most dangerous of situations. And you heard them talk about the specific unit that executed this arrest warrant. They're dealing with some of the most violent offenders we have in our city, and they're doing it day in and day out. So it gives you some perspective of what these officers were up against when they went and executed this arrest warrant earlier this morning. And they actually shared a couple of details about this, that the suspect allegedly opened fire on these police officers as he was coming to the door, and there were small children in this apartment as well.
Right.
And so it just gives you perspective here of just how incredibly dangerous this situation was. And sadly, one officer losing his life, the other one injured, hopefully going to be recovering here at Memorial Hermann. But of course, the chief just asking for so many prayers right now for these officers, because day in and day out, they're putting their lives on the line.
They certainly are, and especially these officers in this most dangerous of units here. And what they do, what their responsibility is to essentially clear the streets of terrible criminals, those repeat offenders. And this guy had a warrant out for his arrest. He was clearly labeled dangerous. They approached the door, as you said, and immediately that suspect started firing, killing that officer after he said he was shot several times. They didn't give a number, they just said several. So we know that it was just many rounds. So.
Another interesting detail that they mentioned, though, Charlie, that we had not heard beforehand, was they arrived at this unit. A woman answered the door. They were speaking with her for a moment before this shooting occurred. But as you mentioned, also small children inside that apartment as well.
Yes, just awful details coming out about this. I mean, just the notion that anybody could shoot at a police officer to begin with is just, mind-boggling, but also to have children nearby, other innocent bystanders that could have been hurt in all of this. And so, again, it just gives you so much perspective on what our police officers are up against every single day. And these officers in particular dealing with some of the most violent offenders we have in our community. And so I believe we do have a soundbite from the mayor and the chief right now that I think we're going to go to.
And talking with his wife this morning, Suzanne, who also happens to be a retired police officer. She retired December of last year. And one thing that she made very clear to me this morning is that Mayor, the city of Houston, lost the very best, the very best.
31 years of service, just a few days short of that. Most of us know him personally. I've known him my entire career. And just as his wife said, what a great man. What a great officer.
All right, so you just heard both the chief and the mayor speaking about the fallen officer who lost his life earlier this morning, William Bill Jeffries, 31 years with the department, talking about his family, his wife, who we learned had just retired from HPD back in December, and having this happen just a few months later, just incredibly devastating. But obviously, she's still remaining very proud of her husband and the service to his community. But yeah, just a very emotional feeling out here. You know, we all were hoping for positive news, you know, that both of these officers would be able to pull through from their injuries. But unfortunately, we have gotten, you know, some bad news here that one of the police officers has passed away. The other one, a sergeant, currently recovering in the hospital right now. And I believe that sergeant does have 20 years with the department. And so we're really praying right now that he will be able to recover from his injuries. And that's the ask from the chief as well, is that everybody be praying over the sergeant who is currently in the hospital right now. But yeah, just a very emotional morning out here. A lot of police officers surely getting some very devastating news about one of their own.
Yeah, plenty of tears shed, no doubt. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Charlie Etzedy. We appreciate that reporting. Something that struck me as well during that news conference was when the mayor said, or possibly even the chief Finner said, he was getting ready to retire as well. They were building their dream home. They wanted to spend the rest of their retired years, you know, in peace. And here you have all of this tragic events take place.
I know, so many thoughts in between all of those words. And as Charlie has been mentioning, so many people at the hospital. You've never seen that many officers. Now we can begin to understand why. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
I think they shot each other. Yes, I do.
You're looking at a solemn moment which took place earlier this morning, probably less than 30 minutes ago. You see a lot of officers there praying, gathering in solemn prayer as they get word that one officer was killed and another seriously wounded and in surgery even now.
Yeah, if you're just joining us, that Houston police officer, a 31-year veteran, was killed while trying to serve an arrest warrant. He was part of the Major Offenders Division of the Houston Police Department, and they were attempting to serve a narcotics arrest warrant on a suspect who opened fire at that apartment complex. He was one of two officers, but what we do know about him, 31 years on the force, just shy of a few weeks, and also well-known and well-respected by everyone. Even the police chief says, I've known this man my entire career.
And you know who else knew him clearly very, very well? Chief Art Acevedo.
Absolutely.
Who is likely following all of this as well. He knows him, understands him, loves him. It's a big loss for everyone. Bree Berry standing by right there at that location where it all happened. Bree?
Good morning. Yeah, you just said one officer we know, the heartbreaking news now, dead, another in the hospital. This started after just 7 a.m. this morning, and you can see behind me, we're inside the apartment complex now, where a very heavy police presence is still here, even hours later, still trying to piece together everything that happened. Now, we've learned that the officers were members of the police department's Major Offenders Division, which routinely deals with some of the city's most dangerous criminals, including accused murderers. And we're still waiting to get more details there. We've heard a little bit, but obviously already high stakes, along with issuing an arrest warrant. That's another high risk job there for police officers to carry out. We know that they were issuing that arrest warrant when the suspect opened fire. And as Charlie mentioned, there were children in the apartment. That's what she's hearing from the police chief who was giving that update. And we are dealing with that here, you know, seeing just so many families who are out here watching all of this unfold. Crime tape still up. You can see Sheriff's Department deputies walking around investigating. We have, a number of patrol cars here also working. And we're going to listen to just a little bit of sound to hear more of an update from Chief Finner.
So this morning at about 7:28 a.m., officers responded to an assist the officer. We had officers assigned from the Major Offenders Division running a warrant. They knocked on the door. Female comes to the door, have a conversation with her, asks where's the suspect. The suspects one suspect immediately came out and fired upon our officers. Unfortunately, striking Bill several times. And as we know, he succumbed to his injuries.
Just heartbreaking update there. Certainly not the one we wanted. I spoke to a couple of residents who were standing here just to the side of me watching all this. They said that their children experienced the rush of police showing up to this apartment complex as they took them to school. Obviously, very difficult to explain to their families. Also, they told me that some of their family members who live in apartment complex units past this one, they weren't even able to leave to get to work. So they're still in there, and anybody who needs to get over to their apartments, they're also not able to do that. So a lot of people just sitting out here waiting to see all of this clear up. Obviously, it'll be here for quite some time. We'll continue to give you updates on this heartbreaking situation live from the Timberridge Apartments. Bree Berry, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
It is so very tragic. And thank you, Bree. We appreciate that report and that background.
Yeah, just as you can see, a huge police presence still there investigating now. We want to go back to our Ted Oberg, who has been following this with us here in the studio. And Ted, we talked just a few moments ago about the reality that not only are we seeing more violence, more gun violence on the streets, but we're also seeing more police officers being shot.
This will be the deadliest year for police officers across the United States since 2016, and we're just here now in mid-September. So we know this will be a very dangerous year to be a police officer in this country. As we emerge out of this COVID pandemic, it appears, at least to some who have called this increase in violence alarming, that the trend is not reversing itself and in fact only getting worse, Mel. The officer today who died, Bill Jeffries, joins, unfortunately, a long list of Houston police officers who have died in the line of duty. The most recent, Sean Rios, in November of 2020, and before that, Harold Preston in October of 2020, who was also killed in the midst of trying to arrest a suspect, that one in a domestic violence case. And Mel, we were just talking about that, you and I, in the break. because of the behavior of the shooters that we hear described from Chief Finner. Willing to fire in the presence of small children and his girlfriend in the instance this morning. And we know in one of the more recent instances, Harold Preston's case, that suspect shot his own son that day. So what we're seeing is a level of violence that certainly police are having a tough time addressing, simply because of the lack of thought and caring that goes before you pull that trigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Ted, just quickly, I know we don't have much time, but I mean, we're talking about those who are being released on bond, that bonds, no bonds, or reconnaissance bonds, or low bonds.
Yeah, we certainly don't know the details of this suspect, Art, but that'll definitely be one of the first questions people ask. And interestingly enough, the ATF has said that they are so eager to get these people who are willing to pull the trigger off Houston streets because in their mind, the first one's the hardest. By the third shooting, they stop thinking about it.
Yeah, unbelievable. Well, Ted, we're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, we're hearing word that they will be moving Officer Bill Jeffrey shortly. It's certainly one of the most moving and tragic scenes that we ever see. We'll be back in just a moment.
Mic check 1 2 3 4 5. Okay. Okay.
But guys, with that, I'm going to toss it back inside to you.
You know, Charlie, we've seen these sadly too many times, but as you did say, ABC13.com, we're going to be streaming all of this procession. It's so moving to see all of those officers in line with their lights on, they're flashing. Do you get a sense there that they're really beginning to come and participate in this thing?
Yeah, and you know, Art, they have been out here for hours, just like we have. Both of these officers, when they were en route to the hospital, received, a trail of officers that were following them, escorting them all the way here to the hospital. And since then, many of these officers parked their vehicles and have been sitting outside waiting with the rest of us. And so, once that procession gets started, we'll bring it to you right here on ABC 13.
All right. Thank you so much, Charlie, for being out there. And as she says, just the images themselves, astounding, looking at all of those motorcycle officers waiting. We will bring you that ceremony live on our digital ABC13.com or your news app, and that will happen in just a few minutes.
And we'll be back here at 3 o'clock.
Sweater, you can definitely break it out as we